We hope to set the stage for where we're at when it comes to accountability for the war crimes of the last administration. Hopefully, we can talk about what a real reckoning with what happened might look like and give people some actionable steps. And so, my guest here today is Ashish Prashar. Ashish is a political strategist, human rights activist, and writer. He was an advisor to the Middle East peace envoy and press secretary to the mayor of London. Ashish also worked as a strategist for presidential campaigns and has led social justice initiatives around prison and police reform and Palestine. He's a fellow at the Royal Society of the Arts and sits on the board of Just Leadership. He's appeared as a regular commentator in media outlets including CNN, Al Jazeera, TRT, and The Guardian. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I know for people in the US and around the world, there is a ton going on with this new administration. We saw in recent days a pause on federal spending that threatened people's healthcare coverage, Head Start, and so many different federal grants. That was luckily paused by a judge, but we're very stressed out, and we have every right to be. This new president does have a quite terrifying lineup of nominees that are being appointed. So there's a lot of reason for people to be stressing out and responding to all of these things that are going on. But there is a window for what has happened in the last year and a half to create some sort of systems of accountability. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians are dead. We've been celebrating the videos of them walking back to northern Gaza, but they are coming back to destroyed homes, broken families. Pretty much everyone in Gaza has lost someone and lost probably several people that are very important to them in some of the most horrific ways that we've ever seen. So we do need to hold this last administration accountable and talk about ways of doing that. And I want to assure you, we will get to ways that people can actually do that today, what it looks like over the next few months and this critical window. So, Ashish, when new presidential admins come in, how have we been distracted? Like, how has it happened in the past? And what happens to the chances of accountability if we don't seize that window in the initial days?
So there's also goods and bads about the way we've had to watch this genocide in real time. Like you think about the historical example of Iraq and George Bush. There is no reason we shouldn't have prosecuted Iraq for everyone involved in that, right? But the crimes, the depth of the crimes didn't come out for years after the event itself, right? The invasion itself was 2003, but it was closer to the election of Obama we really discovered that. And, I think a lot of Americans in that range of time had forgotten about how horrific some of the stuff was on the ground. A lot of people do remember Abu Ghraib, but they don't remember all the atrocities that we committed. And Obama wanted to wash it and start a new chapter and didn't go after anyone. And that's traditionally American presidents taking care of American presidents. Look, as the legacy media right now, and the American public turn to Trump this and Trump that, and this shock and awe tactic that his administration is doing, they're throwing everything and seeing what sticks. And I understand why it's stressing people out. But we cannot forget the staggering scale of destruction that has taken place on the Palestinian people. And, I know it's hard to not be distracted by the headlines, but we must never forget, or end seeking justice for these crimes. Americans who haven't talked about Gaza or Palestine have shown any solidarity with the Palestinians in the last 60 months are now like celebrities crying on TikTok and Instagram about people being deported. You should be sad. You should be taking care of those communities. But why is it different when other children are being massacred? Trump's own statements, by the way, underscore the dangerous reality, ahead, right? While he's bragging about brokering a ceasefire, by the way, showing that Biden never is serious about a ceasefire, he's already reversed sanctions on extremists in Israel. He has suggested that the ceasefire itself won't work, and he's talked about cleaning out Gaza. But however, there's no difference between him and Biden, and no difference between him and Obama, and no difference between him and his first term or Bush. Trump just simply holds up a mirror to America. This is who we really are in our political establishment, right? Not all the people, the establishment. Make no mistake about it. His public call for ethnic cleansing is American foreign policy. Like, that is the truth. And that's the part that people need to get away from their team sport on this. This is our policy to remove people from their indigenous land. Trump is just continuing the work, and he's just frankly more honest about it and more intent, more direct. Biden and Blinken will lie to you and gaslight you, but they'll be doing the same thing. Now, we have to really, people watching, Republicans and Democrats, no one is going to be our ally in the pursuit of justice here, right? Their mission simply is to complete the erasure of the Palestinian people. But let's not forget what Biden and Blinken did in this moment. They were not just architects of this genocide alongside the Israeli occupation. Biden and Blinken provided military arms over 16 months to execute it, right? They also gave, in their 20 billion of military aid, they funded 70% of the Israeli genocide of Palestinians. 70%. They provided enough bomb for, I think, 4 or 5 Hiroshimas. The Biden team also made a mockery of international law. The Israeli occupation publicly talked about a starvation policy and have destroyed the healthcare system. It burnt it to the ground. There's mass graves, tens of thousands of amputations, field executions on TikTok and on social media platforms. There's rape, torture, aid workers have been killed, journalists have been gunned down, war crime after war crime. And clearly breaches of international law, but also breaches of Articles 3 and 4 of the Genocide Convention specifically, which prohibit aiding and abetting these crimes, aiding and abetting the commission of these war crimes. They've also violated US government law. I mean, this is the part that people don't talk about. They violated our own laws. The Leahy Law, one for supplying arms for people committing war crimes, but also Section 620 of the Foreign Assistance Act. We're supposed to be giving aid to the Palestinians, but not giving, and also don't give aid to people who are actually committing war crimes in real time. And they covered it up too. They knew about starvation from the beginning, and even in their internal memos that have been leaked have shown they've done a crazy job of trying to run political interference in letting those documents go public. But Blinken has known since last March or last April, officially, we knew it's from the beginning, that they were starving the Palestinians to death while bombing them. They vetoed 4 UN resolutions for a ceasefire. They have interfered in arenas of international justice by threatening judges at the ICC through diplomatic relations. They've sanctioned them, or they're trying to still at this point. It's passed over to the new administration. And, they have said that they had to wait for an ICJ ruling on genocide to take it seriously. But every turn, they don't recognize the ICJ's power on this.
And try and sanction them.
And they have basically, their opinion on what this is. We all know it's a genocide. Just their feelings about this don't matter. Israelis' occupation's feelings about this don't matter. They've live streamed this to the world. The evidence is all there for us to see. It's the easiest, I hate to say, genocide to document and get convictions on. There now must be a reckoning for those who've supported the Israeli occupation. There must be a reckoning for those who've aided and abetted these war crimes against humanity. There must be a reckoning for those who've created consent, and that includes people who are affiliated, like just press spokespeople, like the Matt Millers, the Karine Jean-Pierre's, who parroted lies and created the consent that's allowed this genocide. And what has happened in Gaza and Palestine is also a result of, I think, institutionalized impunity. Frankly, the international institutions like the UN have failed us at every turn here. And instead of waiting years for justice, we should act swiftly right now and deliver it. Now is the time, simply because we see the crimes happening in real time, and they're still happening right now. There's breaches of the ceasefire every day. So we should pursue justice now, not wait 5 or 6 years till, we might get over Trump, if that ever happens, to come back and look at these war criminals.
And also, I know it's like a constant state for our side of the movement to constantly be in crisis. We are constantly dealing with new challenges, and very, very dire ones, like when the genocide began, and every day since then, right? If we want to stop living in crisis, that requires us to pursue justice and accountability, because the reason any of this is allowed to happen is because we've allowed it to happen, administration after administration after administration. So when we talk about like a reckoning, I think, we saw the genocide Joes. We saw the encampments outside of Blinken's house. What do you think the breadth of accountability looks like for this administration. Who is it? Like, who are we identifying besides, obviously Joe Biden, and obviously Antony Blinken, who lied to Congress about the food aid not being let in. Who else are we looking to right now?
Right, I think, and there's a point that needs to be made here, right? Like we've known the Israeli occupations for decades been ethnically cleansing Palestine from 48 to now, right? It's been systemic. It's been supported by the West. They've even talked about things like publicly, mowing the lawn like every few years, killing a
Yeah.
few Palestinian children. And that's in our newspapers, and no one bats an eyelid in our political establishment. The world must maintain a comprehensive public record of all the crimes committed by all the individuals. And there's layers to that. Yes, it's easier to get those Israeli occupation soldiers who posted their crimes quite literally.
Mhm.
But also, all perpetrators must be held accountable and prosecuted. These are people who have written the policies that have allowed this to happen, right? They're people who've authorized the weapons. Look, half the State Department is complicit. Half the State Department right now is complicit in war crimes. They knew what was happening. And instead of doing anything about it, I think Nuremberg sets the scene for this,
Yeah.
right? They used to be like, resign or stay inside and fight the power, right? Nuremberg sets like, if you stay in power in any way, you are complicit. And that was Nuremberg's result, right? It doesn't matter if you were the secretary at the internment camp. It doesn't matter if you were a secretary or a press person in Hitler's wider political movement in the Nazi movement in the 30s. You were complicit. And then that's how we need to look at everybody who's played a role here. It should be every single person's duty now to continue to bring them to justice for their atrocities, not just on the ground, but how they've created the environment for this, right? And some of those names that we talked about, right? And as you know, I've created a semi-famous deck of cards about this, right? We created a card deck so people would know who it was. It's so obvious to know that Benjamin Netanyahu and his war cabinet are responsible for this. It's obvious that Joe Biden is responsible for this. But what we made sure, we stacked the deck with the entire US war cabinet that was responsible for this crimes. This is people like Jake Sullivan, Brett McGurk, John Kirby, who everyone's forgotten because Trump's a worse person at the podium than John Kirby, but he was out there preaching lies every day and, pretending that we cared about Palestinians while spreading lies about what the resistance had done and covering up Israeli atrocities every day. We have people in the Kamala Harris herself. There was a big pushback, that, oh, she's not the president, she's not responsible. Would we have said that to Hitler's vice chancellor? I asked people who say that Harris is not responsible. Would we have ever said that about Hitler's vice chancellor or any other government that's committed a genocide in Rwanda or anyone in those countries where you've seen these take place? Would we have ever said that about the deputy person in charge? I don't think so. It suits a narrative here to say she didn't do anything, but she's equally as complicit. And, it also goes down to the press people. There is precedent for this. Nuremberg is one, but Rwanda, where media and political spokespeople for parties have been prosecuted for spreading the lies and spreading a narrative that allowed us to walk into genocide. And we should look at that history and say, just because you were there to do a job does not make you less complicit to the people signing off the bombs and executing people in the field. And that's really important, how we do that. To your point, look, the modern era of international humanitarian law, as the West has proclaimed it, is pretty much dead. The West has only upheld it, but it's actually lit it on flames through this, right? And that's done by Washington, D.C., it's done by London, it's done by all the Western nations that set up the ICC, that set up the ICJ. It's a bit of a stain on our collective conscience, honestly. And they intend to normalize this, to create exemptions in the law for them to commit atrocities. But while champion international law, it will only ever be deployed against populations that they don't like Russia or an African country who might have committed atrocity. And those things should be followed through on, but the West will pick and choose. But the law has power, and we can still use it on behalf of emancipatory struggles. And that's really important to remember. And it needs to be wielded in sophisticated ways on behalf of the Palestinian liberation movement. And we can use the same tools that they designed after World War II against them. Now you're already seeing it, right? And I want to give people time to ask questions about this, but it's taking place right now. You look at the Hin Rajab Foundation out of Europe. They are taking Israeli occupation soldiers' crimes documenting them and submitting it to local courts all around the world. Because people don't know this. It's not just, you know, international law that people are breaking people's domestic laws.
Mhm.
Post 9/11, most countries have passed war crime laws, terrorism laws. If you've committed an atrocity or a war crime, you can be prosecuted for that. So a great example of what the Hind Rajab Foundation did recently was they got an Israeli occupation soldier's war crimes, because he put them on his social media, send the evidence to a Brazilian court, and they had an arrest warrant out for the guy while he was on holiday. And he escaped quickly, and he was fled the country before they could execute it. But the crimes are out there for everybody to document. And what we need, it's time for international human rights lawyers to step up, skip the ICC, quit waiting for the ICJ's ruling, take the model from the Hind Rajab Foundation. If you've got humanity in your bones, that is why you practice that law. International law gives you a way to do that. There is something called universal jurisdiction, which is a way for people to go after people who've committed grave violations of international law, crimes against humanity, genocide, torture. And you can apply it in domestic courts in anyone who signed the Rome Statute, which is about 140 countries in the world. So if an Israeli occupation soldier is in one of those 140 countries, you can have them arrested as an international human rights lawyer when they're on that soil for the war crimes they committed against another member state in Palestine. And the most famous example of this is the prosecution of the former Chilean leader Pinochet in the UK and
Mhm.
Spain. They arrested him there domestically, not in international court, to prosecute him from his crimes when he was an authoritarian leader. And there's no reason to wait another moment to file cases against the Israeli occupation, the Biden administration, because frankly, the evidence is there. It's in the South Africa submission, it's in the ICC arrest warrants, and it's frankly on every social media platform that exists today.
Some of our members in California are part of a lawsuit that's suing members of Congress in California specifically over their votes to, or I guess
Mm.
inaction to prevent weapon sales to Israel going through, or weapon shipments to Israel going through. And like you said, we're in violation of the Leahy Law and section of the Foreign Assistance Act, continuing to arm human rights violators like Israel.
Mm.
So like when we are breaking our own
Mm.
domestic law, first of all, Congress isn't doing their job. Like, these people are elected to represent people. Vast majority of Americans don't want to send weapons to Israel and want a ceasefire. So they're not doing their job in the first place. That's something else completely on its own. But then we only got like a small handful of senators voting against or voting for a joint resolution of disapproval that would block the newest arms
Mhm.
sale to Israel. So what do you make of like Congress and these elected officials who are doing this kind of thing?
Well, we need to make the environment impossible for them, right? That's really our job. Look, Palestinian liberation will be delivered by Palestinian resistance
Hmm.
on the ground and their allies in the region. Our job is to make the West's support of the Israeli occupation, continued ethnic cleansing, impossible for our Western governments, our politicians, and make their lives hell everywhere they go, and including, frankly, all these Israeli occupation soldiers who happen to be American, British, and French. You know, they are citizens of our countries. They're not
Hmm.
citizens really of that region and don't have any background in that region. They are literally from here, and we should be making their lives hell here. And I think, obviously the international lawyers can go after that, and obviously domestic lawyers here can go after members of Congress for not doing their job. But I also want to throw this out there as well. The public can do this too, right? The public has a role to play here, right? And this is where I think members Code Pink, but also wider public are like, what else can I do? Well, look, the biggest protector of war criminals outside of the occupied land of Palestine is, of course, the United States. And
Hmm.
not far behind that is the UK. And citizens of the US should not be comfortable knowing that the Israeli working next to them could have tortured a Palestinian in the last 16 months, right? If they've deployed to Israel. They shouldn't be comfortable knowing that the Israeli teaching their child might have executed a child in Gaza. They shouldn't be comfortable, you know, knowing that the guy who's Israeli, or woman who's Israeli, hitting them on the bar might have raped Palestinians. All well documented, by the way. All well documented and celebrated in Israeli press. These things. These aren't like hidden crimes. Citizens in the US should be calling on our institutions, our justices, even our police forces, and force their hand using laws to have these people arrested, charged, locked up, make it impossible to be in the world, frankly. None of us, you could argue that none of us are safe until the Israeli occupation soldiers who live among us and travel to our countries are allowed to roam streets freely. But also this applies to the Biden administration, right? They should not be able to move in the world without being constantly reminded of their crimes that they've committed. If they are joining your company, if they're taking a board seat at your foundation or a foundation that you support, or a company that you're a shareholder in, or someone that you are just a consumer of, they should be harried from those positions.
Hmm.
They should be Their role in that company should be so impossible that they should be leaving. They should be effectively ostracized from society and defunded if they're trying to set up their own thing as well, right?
Hmm.
Nobody wants that attention. No organization wants that attention forever, right? If they're going to the board of a foundation that ironically could give money to children, right, in a third world country, you could argue, why is that organization comfortable having a former Biden administration person on the board that just literally wiped out tens of thousands of children in Gaza? We should make sure that we mobilize to make sure that person is removed. We should
Yeah.
make it impossible for any of these people to exist in our world safely and get on with their lives. The public has power. It can make demands of its own organization if you work there. It can make demands of organizations you have interest in, whether it be shareholders or consume there. There should be no safe place for any of these war criminals to just get on with their lives if they've contributed to this genocide. And that means not just Israeli occupation soldiers. That means people who we might have voted for 4 years ago, who we might have put into office 4 years ago. They should not be comfortable leaving their homes and taking public roles going forward, whether they go and work for MSNBC, like some of the press spokespeople I'm sure will go on to. MSNBC should be hounded. Letters should be written. There should be protests outside their office until these people have taken off air. Their livelihood should not exist at this point. That, when it becomes untenable for committing a genocide, that is when you will get justice. That's when people will start act. That's when Congress people might start thinking, wait, I will not be able to live outside of here eventually if I continue to keep voting on this, right? This public call needs to be more aggressive at this point if we're going to pursue justice, because Congress has no interest. It wants to do what Obama did with Bush and water under the bridge and move on.
Yeah. I don't think that's common knowledge. I don't think a lot of people, I know they're old as hell, but these people don't just retire after they leave the White House. They, like Ashish was saying, they join the boards of foundations, charities, they join nonprofits, and it's all public information. You can find who the board of a nonprofit is. You can challenge them if they're in your city. Like, if these people are like moving back to the places they're from, like all around the country, you have like you have tangible access to those foundations and charities and nonprofits. A lot of them go on speaking tours. A lot of them write books that you can find all over Barnes and Noble and a bunch of booksellers. They go speak at universities. They have a permanent speaking slot at universities. That's a student's challenge. That's a student's campaign. So there's so many just campaigns that open up after an administration leaves. And also like seeing who these nonprofits have speak at their events, that's perfect grounds for disruption. um but yeah, I'm thinking like long term, Ashish, and please, if you have questions, if you're watching, please put it in the Q&A section. I'll monitor that for the end. But can you speak a little bit to like maybe what power unions might have in this fight?
Yeah, yeah, unions have huge power. Look, and I know unions have been attacked and, their power has been deliberately dismantled by not just Republicans, Democrats over the last 2 decades. But unions can shut this country down. Like, still to this day, can shut this country down. The mechanical union that works with the arms industry could stop this tomorrow. Like, they literally, your members of that union could stop this. And we're already seeing this in other countries, right? Shipping unions in Italy will not dock Israeli ships. They will not dock actually US and other European nation ships to take weapons to Israel. The irony here is, I'm going to say this to everyone, the most fascist leader in Europe is the only one with a full arms embargo, Meloni. It's because her unions threatened to shut the country down, and public support of Palestinians is huge in Italy. Even though she doesn't seek this, she's not politically aligned with them. She recognizes the damage that will do to their economy, damage they will do to their country, and frankly doesn't want to be out of step with which is even a more of a popular movement than her own populist movement. It's happened in Spain, in other countries in Europe too, where people will not work, not just with Israeli ships, but American and other countries again, who will take weapons to Israel. They've asked their countries for full arms embargoes. Unions have power because there's power in people. There are more of us than them. And if we start mobilizing unions to stop this, this would be over pretty quickly. I think it was the Docs union who nearly did a strike towards the end of Biden's term. Sadly, they were going to strike on everything but military.
Yeah.
That carve-out was...
That was a bummer.
That was really depressing, and their leadership should be held accountable for that. Their leadership are complicit in war crimes right now. International law also applies to companies and unions. We talk about going after these politicians. There's lots of cases taking place in Europe now going after Airbnb, because Airbnb lease rooms in occupied Palestine, and they're making money off that, of homes that have been stolen. No one here should be using Airbnb. They are literally making money off war crimes as we speak. And that is a case is happening right now in European courts against Airbnb, which is going to be hugely damaging to that. So why is it okay for Europeans to do this stuff? Americans, we have power. There is even more of us here than there are in any individual European country to take action to actually stop this genocide. It doesn't have to be just people breaking into Elbia and weapon systems and vandalizing that stuff. And amazing young people have put their futures at stake to go to prison to stop these weapons going. People can stop these ships at docks. The public can do these things. But also, if you're in a union, you can stop the country functioning to prevent a genocide. And you ask yourself, you all have asked yourself, would you have done this? And I'm sure in conversation before the last 60 months, I would have done something when the Holocaust happened. I would have done something when apartheid South Africa happened. When I think about apartheid South Africa, one story that's not told about that, we always talk about how Mandela peacefully brought the country together and everything else. You forget the unions on the ground broke countries that were supporting apartheid. Unions in Europe stopped their governments functioning, and even in the United States stopped their governments functioning because there was clear apartheid. In Georgia, a lot of industrial action happened here in the United States to stop apartheid. A lot of people don't talk about that because it's not history. We want to keep teaching people how we actually can activate together as a community to prevent atrocities, right? People have said they would have done something during the Holocaust. This is your opportunity right now to stop weapons transfers, to stop the support of Israel and its Israeli occupation of Palestinian land right now, especially while the ceasefire, this pause, I'm going to call it, is happening. Now is the moment to stop our government supporting this everywhere in the West.
So I think sometimes when we talk about this stuff, it feels very abstract. Don't let these people have jobs. Don't let them be on the boards of nonprofits. I want to emphasize to people that these things are so tangible. Join an organization or just have a group of friends. If you see Kamala Harris on a speaking tour in your country, in your state, if you see Antony Blinken going on a speaking tour, if you see anyone who was part of this policy making, make a stink about it wherever you are. It's fully possible. After the Bush administration left, CODEPINK, we made these bookmarks that are on codepink.org/war_criminals. You could still find them there. But Dick Cheney, Eric Prince, they were all coming out with books. So they'd be, filling up the bookstores all around the country. And we made these bookmarks that you could slip into the books wherever they may be, talking about their war crimes, spreading awareness that way is super important. But I'm thinking what other tangible things, ideas off the top of your head, Ashish, do you have? Because these are going to come faster than people think. While Trump's distracting us with everything else, these people are going to start getting jobs at universities, boards of foundations, nonprofits, and everywhere.
So we've spent, I think, and it's really funny, we've already done this as a society in recent time. We did this with Trump's first term. When some of his officials were leaving government, people were outraged that a racist would be able to get a job at their company. Yeah, they were outraged if they had anything to do with the Kushners or anything else. And they wrote, they mobilized, they protested outside those organizations to remove any association with that. I think where people struggle with this, and I think this is my, as a Brit who moved here and is a citizen here, but like moved here, is like, I think people are struggling with the fact that, quote unquote, the good guys did this and they don't want
Mm.
to do it. I think there's reluctance because people think the guys that did this were the guys I voted for. I mean, I've worked for these people, so I'm throwing everything away. You got to undo your world. You voted for the guys that committed a genocide. I'm sorry, a lot of us did. I did in 2020. A lot of us voted for the people to get rid of what we thought was an autocrat to end up our vote ended up helping another person commit a genocide, and it's happened, and that moment in your head has to pass. The Democrats are not the good guys. The American political establishment right now, Democrat or Republican, are not the good guys, and that's how you got to view it. You can't view it as like, oh my God, the side that I was on is the completely, and I want to bury my head in the sand, focus on Trump. That's too easy. I mean, we have sometimes the people we have to go after are the ones that we put trust in to do right by our country, and that is it's like you doing mental gymnastics in your head going, well, but I trust him, he's nice, or I've seen him hug children after school shootings and things like that. Well, it doesn't mean he doesn't want to kill other people's children, and that's still horrific. And I think that's part of it. I think the reason we haven't seen mass mobilization here, at least, really here, and I think why you saw more of it maybe in the UK and like you saw this
Yeah.
million people marches, is the bad guys were conservatives in office at the time, right? But the interesting thing with the UK is Labour have got in on the left, or left of centre. I'm not even going to call them left. They're kind of like the Democrats, right? At this
Hmm.
point, they're kind of the ruling class, and yet those protests are still huge because they've realised that the ruling class is still going to be the ruling class, even though the left got in the middle of this genocide. Now they've continued that momentum. Now, in our case, it's easy to mobilize around Trump. He's going to hit you on every issue, but do not let that distract you from the fact that in our lifetime, someone has committed the worst crime humanly possible, right? And in this instance, done it, live streamed it to the world. And that is why we need to move faster than we ever have to not miss this moment to go after them. Look, there's a lot that people won't be able to do, but the very least the public can do is two things: make their lives impossible to live and move on from this moment. And secondly, do your best to actually either find international lawyers or find experts and force their hand to take action too. There are a lot of people not doing stuff who are qualified to do stuff. And as members of the public, you can actually go, well, why aren't you lifting a finger to go after people with genocide? Look, I know everyone probably listening to this is going, if I had a law degree right now, I'd be filing cases. Well, we've got to ask why international human rights lawyers aren't doing that. We need to put pressure on people that can do that. This pressure isn't just on the people who committed the genocide. Pressure is on people with the ability to actually act to do this. And the third thing, I think, if you are watching from abroad, and I know we're running off on time, and this is really important, the West is not going to do enough to convict all the people that committed this. And we have to accept, the Western powers have only ever really applied international law to everyone but themselves. The Nuremberg tribunal was set up to go after everyone involved in the Holocaust. And I think right now what we need is the global South to set up a tribunal to prosecute everyone involved in the genocide. Because frankly, every European leader in some degree, or at least the majority of them, plus the Biden administration, is complicit in this. I doubt every European court is going to go after all their leadership. And of course, when I think about this, defenders of human rights and who are people pursuing justice for Palestinians in the international law field need to continue these cases that I mentioned earlier. We need to continue to harry people out. But what we also need to do, if you are not from the United States and you are watching from abroad, you need to ask your country to see if they would set up a Gaza tribunal, right? A tribunal hosted somewhere in the global South, whether it be South Africa or another justice-forward country, and make sure everyone who participates, into this enters into some jurisdictional agreement where they can, if they landed in a different country in the global South, they would be shipped off to the country that's hosting the tribunal. And, the legal harrying by the global South is already making a difference. If you think about what South Africa is doing at the ICJ. And in this moment of turmoil with the United States internally, Trump is giving us a window, weirdly, to mobilize around the world to go after the people who've committed this genocide. He's not focused on whether a court in South Africa or France goes after Joe Biden or Anthony Blinken, because he's trying to effectively, probably, build his like autocracy here, and like he's focused on us. He's not focused on that. And if you're watching from abroad, also be lobbying your leaders and your justices and your courts to mobilize on building a tribunal to help liberate and get Palestinians, but also just help get justice against all the people that have participated in this genocide.
Thank you. And I know we did run out of time, so I'm going to plug a couple things, and if you want to plug anything, please do. But it's important to keep this conversation going. I hope we have more. I hope as these people start to pop up, we're able to quickly mobilize around this. Code Pink will definitely be doing it. I hope you all join with us. But if you are interested specifically on following this, and as we update it, like I said, codepink.org/war_criminals is where we'll update this kind of stuff with accountability and resources. Also, at the top of the hour at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, we have a campaign organizing training. You can find that at codepink.org/events. So if you're interested in just getting involved and getting organized and starting a campaign, please, whether it's like we have campaigns on against Netflix for deleting Palestinian stories from their platform, against TikTok for attempting to silence Palestinian stories and actions. So please check that out. And if you want to organize with us, like I said, this is tangible stuff we can do. Like, please, you don't have to join Code Pink. That would be cool, but you don't have to. Just join some cohort of people. And if you want to join Code Pink, it's codepink.org/peacemaker. You could see all the chapters or start one. But please get organized. We have a lot of work to do. And Ashish, thank you so much for being on with me. And do you have anything you want to plug?
Yeah, look, one of I think I mentioned we made this semi-now famous deck of cards. It's the war criminals. It was designed by a Palestinian. Also, yeah, I will show you one of the cards here for the public. Like that's Biden's card. Like so, effectively, we've designed this. Now, what's really cool about this isn't just it's it's a great educational tool, and I would love people to get them just for the educational part of this. But all the profits from all this, the deck go to the Ghassan Abu Sitta Children's Fund in Beirut, which is helping some of the worst impacted children from Gaza heal. He's doing, I can't think of another word, but God's work. And people who don't know who he is, he was the doctor who gave the press conference at Al Shifa the first time Israel attacked it before he was pulled out and evacuated. He's Palestinian. He's giving his life for this work. He's healing children. And all the profits from a deck of cards goes to his. And also, frankly, these are great trolling things. I know some great local business near me in Brooklyn who's Yemeni who bought like 10 and has them on his coffee tables in his coffee shop. So people come in and learn about people who've committed this genocide.
Thank you so much. Please check out Ashish's work. His Instagram is right here in front of you. So thank you so much. This was a great convo. Let's keep having it. And thank you so much to everyone for tuning in. We'll make sure this is available on our YouTube or something like that. But thank you so much, everyone. Lots of love. Peace.
Thank you.